Hi, and welcome to the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. I am Whitnie Wiley. As you can see, Robert Hilliard is not here with me at the moment. I'm expecting him. He's been tied up with a client, and so I expect him at any moment, but the show must go on. So I'm going to get started. If he's able to join, he will join. If not, then you have the benefit, pleasure, honor, whatever it is, however you choose to see it, of listening to me talk about this subject. And if you'd like to participate, I invite you to do so. You can put comments in wherever you are, whether it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, or on Facebook in the Shifting into Action group. Again, this is the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And we are talking today about leadership and setting examples. The reason that this came up for us, and it's a topic that we talk about often, right? What is the role of a leader? Leaders have a number of different roles that they play, things that they are expected to do beyond just hold a title, right? And so whether you actually hold a title or not, when you are in a position of leadership, whether it's as a parent, as the coach of a team, someone who holds the title of CEO, some other executive position, a teacher, whatever it is, one of the things that we do is set examples, right? We get to inspire people, empower them, lift them up, help them to be the best that they can be. And one of the ways we do that is through the examples that we set. And while you're not expected to be perfect, nobody is, nobody can be, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. And the news story that was the impetus for this particular episode on setting examples comes from a couple of weeks ago. Estee Lauder, and it depends on the news report whether John Demsey left under the threat of firing, was told to leave, whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? The bottom line is that he took some action. Estee Lauder did not appreciate it, whether it was the action itself, the flack that they got back from him. It didn't sit well. They asked him to leave. He left. He's now gone. So I don't know, if someone asked me to leave, I consider that being fired, but whether that's technically the case or not, as far as I'm concerned, is not that relevant. But to be perfectly, with a disclaimer, to be accurate, I'm just going to say that I've seen different reports, and choose the interpretation that you want to take on that. So, Mr. Demsey made a post on his personal Instagram account that was a meme of some Sesame Street. You can go look it up for yourself, but it was a Sesame Street, joke that included the N word in it, and about COVID. So that's sort of the context. Again, if you want more details on that, you can look it up. We put a link to one of the articles in the post. You can see it there. For us, it's not so much ever what a particular leader does that lands him or her in the news. It's not that. It's the principle behind it that's the issue. And the principle here is about the examples that we set. Now, I have never worked for Estee Lauder. I am not necessarily an Estee Lauder customer. Estee Lauder has lots of companies, some of which I may have purchased products from before. I don't get anything from Estee Lauder. I do not dislike Estee Lauder. This is not about Estee Lauder. But I did take the time to go and look up their culture and values statement. And it says that they're a values-driven organization, and their actions are rooted in Lauder family values of respect for the individual, uncompromising ethics and integrity, generosity of spirit, and fearless persistence. And then there's some other values that are spelled out a little more. You can look those up for yourself at elcompanies.com if you're at all interested. And one of the things that I think is always important, I do work with clients who are generally in career transitions. They're working on managing their careers. They're looking for new work, and paying close attention to the values that a company purports to have, along with, you do some research and you can find out what is happening with the company, boots on the ground, whether or not those purported values are lived values, because it's really important to be clear about the company that you're attached to. So Mr. Demsey works for a company that has a set of values, and he's expected as an executive to act responsibly in caring for the communities that are served by Estee Lauder companies, and the like. And you'd think that all of us would do that. So again, not about being perfect in any way. This is not about never making a mistake. I am not one as far as I am concerned, I'm not about people necessarily losing their jobs because they have made a comment that is offensive, whether it's a racist statement, a sexist statement, some other is statement. I don't necessarily think that means that people should lose their jobs, but if that's the consequence of someone losing their job based on who they work for, that is what it is. What I am concerned with is that people stop and think about their actions and whether or not their actions are a true reflection of the values that they purport to have and the values of the organizations, whether it's the one they work for, ones they represent, maybe you sit on a board, something like that. Are the actions that you're taking in alignment with the organizations that you're affiliated with? Because if they are not, then you have to, or and your personal values. If they are not, you really need to stop and think about that. And so, I'll share without going into a lot of detail an example. So a few years back, and I shared this recently on a podcast, that a few years back, I had more than a few years back, actually, but some time ago, more than a decade, I was involved with someone who was exhibiting some behaviors that I thought were not the best behaviors. But somewhere along the way, I felt myself getting wrapped up in the things that he was doing and found myself down a path that was not in alignment with my personal values. And when I stopped to think about what I was doing, I was like, Whitney, this isn't who you are. And to do something that's not in alignment with who you are creates angst in your being, in your soul, in your spirit, however you see that. And it's not healthy ultimately, right? And so I had to come to grips with the fact that I was in a relationship, and I'm not blaming him. I take full credit and ownership and responsibility for the things that I did, but I was in a relationship with someone that I was trying to stay connected to. And I thought that the way to do that was to do the things that he was doing. Ultimately, I made a decision that was not a path that I wanted to go down, and chose to go in a different direction. And so we all have these turning points, these forks in the road where the things that we're doing or have the opportunity to do, we have to make a decision. Is this who I am? And if there is a pattern of behavior over and over again, right? You could do something one off and then you stop and think about it. If it becomes 2, 3, 4, multiple times, at some point it's not, oh, I made a mistake. It is a pattern of behavior and it is reflective of who you are. You can still make a decision that says that's not who I am or who I want to be, who I choose to be. Therefore, I'm going to make other choices. And the bottom line is it's always about choices. Always about choices. So, Mr. Demsey made a choice. I don't know if it was the first time, the 10th time, the 100th time that he has shared something. I did a little digging in his Instagram account. I don't know if it had been scrubbed, or if that was truly the first time he'd ever done something like that. But the point is, as an executive of a company, if you are doing that, it's a public account. He had 70, not a lot of followers, but enough, 76, 77,000 followers, something like that. I'm sure your employees are seeing that, right? And there's a message that's sent that says this behavior is okay. And if you're sending a message that that behavior is okay, and then someone else in your organization does it, you don't have a moral high ground to stand on to say this is unacceptable behavior. Therefore, it's important for you to set the examples as someone who's in a position of leadership. So, how do you go about setting these examples? Well, understand that you have to be the one that goes first. And being the example, doing anything that you want to do often requires that you make trade-offs. And so even regardless of something is an ism or an ist or anything like that, if you feel that a joke, a meme, some comment is funny, your sense of humor is your sense of humor, but your decision to share it is a whole other level of reflection of who you are. So it has to be that when you are in these positions and people are seeing you, whether it's employees, whether it's the public, children, whomever, thinking about what you do so that you can walk your talk is vitally important. So here are some things that I think are important for you to consider as you are moving through your days, your interactions with staff. Remember that someone's always watching. And in our day of 24/7 news, in the day of social media, people are out there often looking for gotchas. You can use Mr. Demsey's experience as a learning experience for yourself. So here's some things that are really important for you to think about in terms of the examples that you set. Your attitude. What is the attitude that you are portraying, that you are sharing with the world? Is it a positive attitude? Is it a negative attitude? Is it sort of blasé? Stop and think about what it is that you are conveying from the way you are approaching the world. And recognize that others will take their cues from what they see in you. I'm teaching a course in business law, ethics, and corporate social responsibility in an MBA program. And our very first lesson this term was about this very thing, leadership's role and this setting of examples. And when someone does something in a position of leadership, it sends the message to others that either they can do the same thing or that it's not a big deal, right? And when you do that, it just creates a ripple effect. So as a leader, your attitude, you cannot have a different attitude than that which you expect from others. You want to be someone who is constantly learning. If you show others that learning, growing, from your experiences, not just formal education, but learning from your experiences, developing, growing, taking courses, listening to podcasts, watching programs that are educational in nature. We talked, Robert and I, a couple of weeks ago about employee development, the importance of training, coaching, and mentoring, right? All of those pieces are important for our development. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to show that growing as a person, as an employee, as a leader is vitally important. And you do that first as you provide an environment for others to learn and grow around you. Another one is change. Accepting that change is part of the process. It's a fact of life. And being resistant to change, right? When a lot of change is not something that you can do anything about. You might be able to shape it, but change is going to happen whether you're looking for it or not. And being someone who's adaptable, someone who's flexible in your approaches, you have a goal and you move towards it, but you have to be flexible in how you go about doing that. The strategies that you use, the choices that you make along the way may have to change because there's always external forces that have some impact on what it is you're doing. And so showing that change is just part of the process, knowing when to go with the flow, knowing when to make alternate choices to send the change in a different way, but without resistance to it, right? Recognize what it is and then figure out how to move forward with it. Another area that you've got to pay attention to when it comes to setting an example is about trust. We all want to be trusted. I think most of us would love to be trusted without having to do anything, without having to earn it, right? Some people are the kinds of people who trust first and then give you the opportunity to break that trust. Others require you to earn that trust up front. Knowing which you're working with is important. Knowing how you navigate that space is important. And then making sure that you're acting in alignment with that. If you want people to trust you, you have to be more trustworthy. You want people to trust you, trust them first, right? Extend the olive branch, be the one to trust them first. Listening. Everyone, yeah, I had a conversation yesterday with someone who was talking about the reason that people often get into arguments, right? The underlying foundational reason that people get into arguments is because everyone is working to be the one that makes the point. That is, we are so in a hurry to prove that we know something, that we have the right answer. And that means a lot of times we're doing more talking than listening. And instead of taking that approach, it's really important that instead we listen first and speak later. And one of the things that I have found that is extremely, is vitally important is giving people the opportunity to speak their mind. So in my career, before I worked for myself, became a full-time coach and consultant. I was doing this on the side in my last job, but in my last job, my job it was actually to be a negotiator. I spent a lot of time in negotiation over some really important issues in the state of California with people who had very divergent views. Even within the community that I represented, there were divergent views, and there wasn't always the obvious common ground. And the approach that I took was to be a listener. So instead of always trying to prove my point and to convince people to come to my side, I just became a listener, which allowed me to be a bridge builder, or someone who could bring divergent sides together, bring the stakeholders together, because I could step outside of having skin in the game to of having to prove something, hear what people were saying, hear what they really wanted, assess that, analyze it, rephrase it, reframe it in a way that would bring people together. Was I always successful with that? No, of course not. But most of the time I was, and I chalked that up specifically to taking the time to listen. And when, as leaders, we listen, we send the message that it's okay not to be combative and confrontational, to take the time to hear what someone is saying. And as my husband reminds me often, also hear what someone isn't saying, and then move forward from there. So I'm going to wrap up. Robert obviously isn't going to be able to join us today, and that's okay. But I wanted to make sure that you had some framework from which to think about how you could do a better job being an example. Understanding that someone's always watching, there's always an opportunity to be an influence over those that you're leading, right? You can influence or you can wield power. And when you're wielding power, people will jump. They may say how high, they may just jump without question. But if you can get people to follow you voluntarily, to get on the same page as you, to move with you towards a brighter future, a bigger vision, with less angst, less confrontation, less conflict. Not in a way of avoiding conflict, but because you're all moving together because you've got a common goal. Wouldn't that be a better approach than one that is fraught with conflict and people just doing what you want because they're afraid of you? And if that is the approach that you'd like to take, makes your leadership job much easier, then I would encourage you to explore how you are or are not providing the examples that you want those that you're leading to actually follow. And one of my favorite things to say is, be the leader even you would follow. So with that, I want to thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Beyond Your Best Plan. Not Beyond Your Best Plan. Say, I've got 3 podcasts. This is the State of Leadership. Joining me for this week's State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. And this was just a conversation about setting good examples and how to go about doing that. So we are here every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Welcome you to join us. And if there's a topic that you'd like to see us cover, please feel free to send us a message. We are constantly scouring the news for examples of what's happening in leadership, things that are going well, things that are not going well, that we can learn lessons from, and that we can help you learn lessons from as well. And if there's anything that either Robert or I can do to be of assistance to you, either in the capacity of a coach or consultant, please feel free to reach out. We would welcome the opportunity to talk to you about how we could be of service. So with that, again, thank you for joining me for the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. Have a great rest of your day.